So today's video is on grief and loss. I know this is very different from the content that I usually make, but this has a lot to do with the things that's going on in my life right now, which is kind of why the upload schedule is a little weird. But I hope it helps someone. This is just a compilation of my thoughts, some things I've learned in my life, and I hope it provides aid to anyone, especially if you're going through a difficult time in your life. What is grief? Grief is a natural response to any loss in life. Throughout this video, I'm going to share some myths, things that I have learned are completely false in relation to this whole process. The first one is you only experience grief when someone dies. This is completely false. Because in reality, grief comes in so many different forms. It can be from a death of a loved one, a death of a pet. I think a lot of people really don't understand how devastating losing a pet is. I know that I used to scoff at people who were broken up by losing pets in my youth and in my ignorance. But now I understand, like, wow, that's incredibly difficult to deal with. For a lot of people, losing a pet is just as devastating as losing a family member. Grief can also come up in loss of a job, loss of health, loss of financial stability. It seems to be like this position of stability and then all of a sudden becoming unstable. I think that seems to trigger this whole grieving process and these complex emotions. Miscarriages, loss of a friendship or loss of a relationship, moving, graduation, a lot of this stuff causes grief. For me, when I moved to where I am now, that caused a lot of emotions and things that I didn't even think I was feeling. And a lot of that was related to things I've gone through in my life, but this sudden change of life situation brought on all these emotions that I didn't really know how to deal with. And the same goes for graduation. Sometimes people graduate and they go from this very structured, stable life to now they're on their own and they're working and you don't know how to deal with life. Like, what's this whole life perspective once you're out of college? I think there's a lot of people that struggle with that and don't realize that they're going through this process and these complex emotions. Another thing is never feel shame for grieving. I used to feel shame for grieving. Don't feel shame for grieving. Everyone's different. Everyone has a different process. We're complex creatures. Like I said, it's all subjective. We all deal with grief and loss in very different ways. There's no one way to deal with it. There's no timeline. When I've dealt with grief and loss in the past, I always felt like there was this cloud above me all the time. And so I named this slide the Ever-Present Storm because in those moments I felt like there was this dark cloud that never went away. Grief is highly subjective. For me, it's a complex ball of emotion and experience, stuff that's hard to put into words. So from my personal perspective, these losses are, sometimes I tell myself, like, if I had the option to get my arm cut off or not lose a loved one, cut my arm off, because this pain can be unbearable sometimes. For me, there's a mixture of anger, confusion, frustration, sadness. All of these things, it's hard to put into words. I can also feel like no one really understands. Like, I can talk to people, I can connect with people, but I think to myself, like you really don't understand what I'm going through. Then I can think to myself, like, how can I function while going through this? And I also question so many things, like, why this person? Why this? Why that? I question the fairness in the world, and it's a whole host of different things in my mind. I also feel like I'm on shaky ground or an unstable bridge or quicksand. I feel very unstable, and that's extremely uncomfortable. But these are just the things I felt and I feel now in this process. Loss has always felt to me like an uncomfortable roller coaster. Something I had to tell myself, and I think that's true, is that you're never truly over, quote unquote, the loss you've been through. Now, every loss is different. I know for me, I've lost family members that were very close to me, and I had to remind myself that there's no point in which I should be, quote unquote, over it. Because these emotions, they come in waves, which I really don't like, but that's just how it seems to be. You know, there are little things that can remind you of your loss. Some of these I've never been through, but in general, in the structure of school, like I mentioned, graduation, it can be tough on people. There might be little things or big things that remind you when you were in school, but now you're in this new world that's difficult to navigate. You may have lost a person and someone's mannerisms might have been the same, and that brings a whole flood of emotion. When you lost a pet, maybe you see someone else's pet and it reminds you of yours, or someone's favorite food, or a song from a breakup. There's all these little things that put you on this roller coaster that moves in and out and up and down. And in my experience, it's incredibly difficult to deal with. A myth I want to say is someone saying or you reading something that you should feel this. You should feel this. Something that I learned is that these emotions are complex, hard to describe, and there's never been a consistent set of feelings that I felt. I might feel anger, I might feel confusion, I might feel sadness. It might be a combination of the three. It might be emotions that I don't even know how to put into words. But you should never tell anyone, or you should never accept that you have to feel A, B, and C. A quote that I've always hated is that time heals all wounds. Time does not heal all wounds. Maybe physical wounds, but not emotional ones. There is no timeline to this whole grieving process. A myth is that grieving should last so and so. Sometimes I would tell myself, okay, it's been a year, it's been 2 years, like you should be over it. Like, no, no, no. It's a whole process. It's a process for a reason. But there's also people that in their ignorance might say, oh, it's been so and so. Well, it's been 4 years, it's been 5 years. You should get over this. Again, there's no timeline. You're on your own timeline. Another thing I've learned that's important for me is developing a new normal. Once you've had a loss, you have to adjust and restructure your life with that loss in mind. And that's a complicated process. It's different for everyone, but for me, I had to learn what it means to live life without this person. You know, you can put any situation in that box, but I think there is a new normal that takes place after a loss, especially a very traumatic one. I think the most important thing for me on this slide is to be kind to yourself. I am someone by nature, it's not very kind to myself. I've grown a lot in that, but I think in this whole process, it's really easy to not be kind to yourself. And something that's helped me tremendously is treating myself like I want to be treated. Because this process is already difficult enough. It shouldn't be made more difficult by beating yourself up. And I've definitely been through that. And some more things, go at your pace. And this is a marathon, not a sprint. Again, a lot of this is moving through this on your timeline because it's far too complex to put it into a box. Everyone's different. Lastly, I just want to talk about coping with loss. I've learned that this takes time. I think depending on the type of loss, regardless of it, it takes time. And it's okay to not know how to cope. Something that I always asked myself in the past is like, how do I cope with this? Like, how do I deal with this? You know, maybe some of you guys might be going through a major loss for the first time in your life and you're so confused. Like, what do I do? There's no handbook on it. How do I feel? How should I feel? These are things that I ask myself sometimes, but I've learned, you know, through therapy and some other things is that it's okay to not be okay. Because this is a very fluid and complex process, it's okay to not know what's going on. I think that's just the nature of loss in general. So for me, it took me years to develop healthy coping mechanisms. I'm not that old, but I've been through a lot of loss, especially since I was younger. And for the longest time, I didn't know how to cope. So I went through avenues that weren't very healthy. But over time, I learned therapy definitely helped me. Therapy, everyone feels differently about it. I think if you feel like you should get it, you should get it. You know, I don't think anyone should force therapy on anyone else. But I can speak for myself in saying that it helped me for sure. And then lastly, this has been a personal journey of self-discovery and exploration. I've had to learn over the years how to cope, how to express my emotions. Baking really helps. When I was young, I lost a parent and they like to bake. And baking really helps me connect with them and it just helps me get feelings out in general. This YouTube channel, believe it or not, creating these videos really helps me as an emotional expression to kind of get my thoughts out. Even if it has nothing to do with sadness, creating and thinking and making videos for you guys really helps me. Music, listening to music, feeling music really helps me. I recently got into poetry, which is crazy for me, but that's really helped me. Crying helps me. And the reason why I say that, there are these myths, especially with men, and I think it's also attributed with women or anyone, however you identify. Be strong, don't cry, man up. As a man, this is stuff that's told a lot. And I can vividly recall times that it was told to me. And I'm sure if you're a man and you've been through a loss, you can recall a time it was told to you. Unfortunately, this reinforces these unhealthy ideas of what a man is. And as a side note, I'm Black, and in the Black community, especially with Black men, there's a lot of unhealthy discourse in regards to how you should deal with your emotions. Oftentimes, emotions are stuffed down and you're not supposed to feel things. You're supposed to be hardened. But this just makes the process even more difficult. And I love walking. I love going on walks, clear my mind. I love going on a good drive. These are just my personal experiences. Like I said, everyone's different. You know, everyone deals with things in their own way. It may take you a while to figure that out, and that's okay. But I think at the end of the day, finding ways to cope is really important. But again, everyone's on a different timeline. You know, you don't have to force yourself to do that. So that's all I got. I hope at least one person made some connections. I hope this helped at least one person. Like I said, a lot of this was just my personal experience. And making this video has really helped me with what I'm going through right now. I'm not going to go through a summary because this isn't like a teaching video. It feels weird for me to go through a summary. So thank you guys for watching and listening. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll be back soon with another video.